So now we're going to move on to podcasts that I listen to on a regular basis to help me build my video knowledge. And also they speak it, all these podcasts do it in a way where it's nice and clear for the audience, no matter what level you are in terms of your marketing knowledge, in terms of your technology knowledge, or in terms of what you may or may not know. Now, of course, this isn't a definitive list. Like I said, I listen to a minimum of 4 to 5 hours of podcasting a day. So this is not a definitive list. This is just a nice trimmed list that of podcasts that we listen to very regularly. And then from there, we'll possibly give you a bigger list maybe next year. You just guys have to comment that if you want that or not. So we ready to move on to the next one? I think we are. Okay. So the first podcast that we definitely recommend for anyone interested in doing video or doing marketing on a decent scale for their business, highly recommend Todd Hartley's Video Marketing Mastery. Video Marketing Mastery. He has an intro that comes in of a very American woman. And of course, Todd Hartley is American. He runs a business called Wirebuzz, where they do a lot of video productions around the world. And it's just, as an Australian, it kind of makes it quite apparent when the American accent is very far forward and you're like, ooh, okay, there we go. And then we get going. But as the podcast states, it's about online video strategy, YouTube tips, and video production. Again, pretty much straight up my alley. So all the stuff that he talks about is very insightful in regards to always starting off about return on investment when it comes to video, how to script your videos. Most of his podcasts is leaning a little bit more towards people with experience. So he does talk a lot about methodology, strategy, all that type of thing. But it's stuff that you can easily pick up with someone who is maybe not entirely knowledgeable about the industry or the situation. You'll be easy enough to pick up most of the stuff that Todd talks about. And so, say for example, one of his recent podcasts is called Discover How to Maximize Your Prospect's Attention Span. And that's one major thing that a lot of people do get confused when it comes to video, is that people's attention spans are so short nowadays that, smaller than a goldfish. And that's why videos need to be short, punchy, and wham. And that's not true. And as Todd has mentioned many times in his podcast, it's not that people's attention spans have gotten shorter. It's just that their will to listen to something they're not interested in has gotten shorter. When I say back in the olden days, and I say olden days, anything over than like 10 or 20 years, you had to sit down and listen to the radio to get back to your show. You had to sit back and listen for the ads to go past to get back to your favorite TV show. You had to wait and listen for the ads to go past in the movie before you could get to watch your movie. And people's perceived, attention span was maybe they probably weren't paying attention, but you didn't have any analytics to show that. And when I say analytics, I mean numbers and goals and stuff like that you can see now with the power of the internet. We can see how many times people have watched a video, for how long, if they came back and watched it again, when they dropped off, when they got back on. And you have all these details there that you can see on a very large scale. And of course, when it came time back in, say, even in the 90s, we didn't have that much power when it came to analytics. And also, when you bought an advertisement in the paper, all the paper could really give you in terms of numbers or analytics was, hey, this is the place that most people buy our newspaper from. Most people that buy our newspaper are, the ages of 20 to 35, probably. They didn't know that for sure. And they're going to say, okay, the bigger the ad, the nicer colored the ad, more people are going to see it. Not necessarily. You have no numbers backing that up. And they didn't really have that idea either. But now that we have all these numbers and all these analytics and this big data is what it's called to back up the information, Todd is talking about in this podcast, which I believe I've listened to most of the time when I listen to podcasts and when we go through this list. Most of the time when we listen to podcasts, when I listen to podcasts, I have a tendency of getting the nuggets or getting the stuff that really applies to me and my situation, writing it down, putting it in my Notion, which is a note-taking application, and it allows me to put it into something that I can actually use. So it can, in the sense of I can put it into a live stream like I'm going to give you guys, or make it into another video, or maybe put it into a blog. I am working on that. I'm just terrible when it comes to writing, but I am working on it. But I can actually use this information to help inform you guys, but also it helps inform myself and it helps me teach myself how this works, and hopefully get better over time, so then I can help better perform for you guys, better coach you guys, better teach you guys how to use the strategy to your advantage. So that's something that I definitely recommend when you when you listen to Todd Hartley. And do check out YBuzz. The website's pretty slick. They know what they're talking about. Of course, most of the time, and the people that are going to be listening to this podcast are probably... The people that are listening to this podcast are probably not the same people that are going to be Todd Hartley's clients, of course, because these guys, most of the clients that YBuzz works with are at that large corporate level. They have a lot of, funnels and things to work out, as opposed to small and medium businesses. But again, most of the stuff that he talks about is pure gold. He has a lot of data and a lot of knowledge to back him up in the years that he's done this. And he's a little bit like me he's a little bit like me in the sense of when he first started doing video, that he was that videographer. He was out on the ground, pounding the pavement, doing all the videos, doing it all. And now he has a team to do that work for him. Very much like what we do at Video Confidence Coach. I have a team of videographers to do the actual videoing for me, while I concentrate on the strategy, on the scripting, on the person in front of the camera, on the clientele, on all the other aspects that, yes, videographers do have a little bit of a knack of possibly working that in. But as a videographer, and if any one of you are videographers, feel free to comment below, but you're a bit concentrating on the technical aspect of getting the right shot, making sure it sounds good, making sure it looks good, making sure nothing can go wrong, that you're technically safe and sound. You don't really have time to deal with any of the confidence issues or any of the issues that the person in front of the camera might be having, because you got to concentrate on what your job is. And that's why we at the Video Confidence Coach work on both the strategy, so the big picture element, but also the person in front of the camera, because it's always best to be in front of the camera talking to the audience genuinely, but most people don't have the confidence to do so. Do you have the confidence to represent your brand or your company? If you don't, that's fine. I completely understand, but if you can't put your face to your company, what would really be the point of you being the head of your company? Just something to think. So now we'll move on to the second one that we recommend. Second one that we recommend is called the Gold Digger Podcast. Now, I didn't say gold. G'day, Bodyworks Bliss. There we go, I waved. Now, remember, we didn't say goal. Oops, there we go, I missed it. Now, remember, we didn't say gold, as in the shiny gold. Hey. We said goal, as in orientation, as in my goal. And this is a podcast from Jenna Kutchner. I will get her name right. So this is the podcast, the Gold Digger Podcast. Remember, I didn't say gold, I said goal, as in orientation. And this is a podcast from Jenna Kutcher. And she has a lot of great podcasts that discuss everything, not specifically video related, but everything around business, and running it yourself and doing the hustle, but doing it in an organic way that actually makes sense to you. Most of her podcast episodes are framed at, or should I say, aimed at women or female entrepreneurs, but most of the time, most of her content very heavily relates to anyone in business. She does a combination of interview podcasts where she interviews people that she knows that either have expertise in a specific area or are able to give you insights as a small business owner on a specific thing and get, Jenna's advice, as well as doing shorter podcasting episodes where she directs you as the listener directly and talks about specific things, very much like what I do with the live streams here, where I direct to you as the listener, as the viewer, and answer your questions as a whole, as opposed to actually having an interview with someone. So very much like what we do on the Do Video podcast. But yeah, most of the stuff that she does is brilliant. I'm on her emailing list, and all the stuff that she does on her podcast is true to her. There's no real gimmicks. And of course, there's some things that may, interest you or may not. There's a lot of podcasts that I listen to fairly regularly where I read the title and I read a little bit of the description before I even consider downloading it to listen to. Because there's some, podcasts that come out like Jenna, which is twice a week. And sometimes I'm not interested in a specific topic, or I'm not interested in a specific question that she's answering or asking. Well, then I won't listen to it. That's your choice as a consumer, as the person listening to these podcasts and getting the information out of them. You have the choice to listen to it whether or not you don't or do listen to them. So, and of course, Jenna, myself, Todd, anyone who runs podcasts, won't be offended if you don't listen to one podcast or even in a few, because it's all about the community that you grow when you host a podcast and when you run a podcast over time, and when you build it and build that community to help and serve people. And essentially that's what you're going to be doing through all your marketing, all your business when it comes to educating your business. No worries. No worries. Body work bliss. Of course. Thank you for listening. You're very familiar. I might remember that. So that's one that, again, is generally business-based, but really good for creative businesses. Now, this next one is the... must remember, I'm a little bit tired from today, and I'll tell you why during the break. The next podcast we have is Girl Boss Creative, a podcast for women entrepreneurs by Taylor Bradford. Now, again, it is, even in the title, it says women creative entrepreneurs, but it does apply a lot to male entrepreneurs in the creative space, but also people in general business. She does come from that perspective because Taylor has run a lot of businesses. I think she's currently in the wedding rental space at the moment with renting actual items and caravans and stuff. She was having a lot of issues in the state of Texas. Yeah, in the state of Texas, where she was in Dallas, I think. Yes, where she was dealing with a couple of issues in regards to, getting the council to give you permission to be come fill your driveway when you're out in the industrial estates, or, allowing you to have power to your building. There's a lot of stuff that she says in regards to business, or a couple of personal things. But a lot of the stuff that she talks about is a lot of, how to set up your email list, like it says on screen, or setting yourself apart with marketing. And she does these 20 to about 45-minute episodes where she goes through and almost pumps you up a little bit in regards to getting your emotions flowing and get your, getting ready to be oh yes, I can do this. Oh yes. You listen to it, anything to do with, say, for example, setting yourself apart with marketing, and it really gets you going in the sense of, okay, I can do this. I can totally, do this with my business. I've got, points to go. I got 1, 2, 3. I'm definitely going to do it. And I highly recommend that you put those to action, or at least give yourself a goal of saying, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do this. Giving yourself that goal is a nice thing, especially after listening to a podcast from Taylor. And she also runs a Facebook group. So all the podcasts that I have mentioned so far, and also that I will mention in the future of this list, will have Facebook groups where you can join and you can, get in touch with the host, but also you can get updates when the podcast is live, but also updates in general when people ask questions, especially the business podcasts. You can learn a lot from them and ask other people who are supporters of the podcast and who listen to the podcast as well, who are probably in the same situation as you, or have been in the same situation as you, and they can really learn a lot from you. And you can learn a lot from them too. So that's one from Taylor. So moving on to a different subject. So again, this is general business, but this one is an Australian. His name is Jack Delosa. From the podcast, you can probably guess. But the name is The Jack Delosa Podcast from Jack Delosa. Now, Jack is a, if you've ever heard of a older learning group called the Entourage. He is the founder of the Entourage, and he also is a prolific entrepreneur, as well as doing a whole bunch of different business-related things over a very short period of time. And I very much enjoy listening to his podcasts because he does have guests on every now and again that give you a lot of incredible insight into whatever the specific topic is. And a lot of his stuff that he talks about is really interesting to consume and learn from. Personally, in regards to the entourage itself, like the business that he founded and is, I think, running, or like he's running in the background, I'm not entirely sold on the premise of the entourage. And I've had a couple of people that I've met who have experienced it or have actually attended it as students, and I haven't heard great things. But, businesses are businesses, so not everyone's going to have a great opinion of you. And I think that's possibly the same with Jack. So, but again, he gives good content, he gives good education. And if you can take away 1 or 2 bits of gold nugget to use in your business, that's really what matters. He's not as consistent as he probably could be when it comes to uploading content, but the content is there. It's useful when you need it, and you can listen to it whenever you feel like, because that's how podcasts work. You can just download it and use it when you can. All right, so we're going to do 2 more, then we'll take a break, and then we'll carry on. So the next one, so for anyone who's actually watching right now, a lot of people are being like, what? So this is a podcast by Katie Seller, and it's called The Boss as Podcast. Now, I guess that you can guess what the F stands for. And this is a podcast aimed at women, because Katie Seller is a woman, and she's about to have a kid at some point. I think at some point? Yeah, fairly soon. She's having a kid by herself. Like, she's run a successful business called Metal Marvels, and she also runs a coffee company as well. But she has a lot of experience with online businesses and e-commerce and hustling by yourself, like running a business by yourself, for yourself, and bringing a team with you. And she also runs, like I said, Metal Marvels and a coffee business, but around like the profanity side of stuff. And personally, when I first found her, I was intrigued by the name, as anyone would. And then I started listening to the podcast. Of course, there are going to be some swear words in there because, it's in the title. But also, Katie is not apologetic when it comes to swear words. Personally, for my branding, I don't use a whole lot of swear words. When I first started, I did, because when I'm outside of business, I do swear a lot because it's my natural inclination to do so. But when it comes to business, I have a tendency of pulling back now when it comes to swearing or using that type of language, because a lot of people just get too distracted or turned off when it comes to it for me to actually get you guys to consume the content or consume the ideas. But for Katie, and if you do Google Metal Marvels, you'll find out why. You can see that the language that she uses isn't used in an offensive term, except for, when it's negatively impacting someone. But it's not used as a negative slur. It's just a period or a dot point or a comma in regards to the grammar of how she speaks. And that's the same thing with a lot of people, especially in Australia. We use the C word a lot in regular conversations because, like I said, it's like a point. You can use it as a noun, as a verb, as an adjective, what have you. You can use it for anything. And as Katie goes through, and when she talks about business, she has a very unique way of explaining it, but also because of the experience that she has about building up these businesses, purchasing underperforming businesses and making them thrive, and when it comes to purchasing from wholesalers, actually doing the grind of setting up, shipping manifests and putting that all together. Sorry, I don't think it's called shipping manifests, but all that stuff that she has a lot of experience in. So if you are in a business that is e-commerce or product related, heavily product related, I highly recommend listening to her podcast. She has taken a break because, as I mentioned at the start, she is pregnant. She doesn't have a partner, so she's, just going to have the baby by herself and being raised with her and her family. So she has taken a break. I think the last episode was in April, but she probably would pick it up. She does run a regular Instagram account and blog, I believe. I think it's called Boss Lady Baby. I think that's what it is. And again, I'm not really so much into kids, but I do enjoy checking in with her. But it's kind of nice to see that a woman can be, self-made, hustle to the point where she runs a successful business, multiple successful businesses, that she can, go off, have a baby, chill, raise a kid, and still do the thing that she loves to do. So I'm quickly going to go to this next podcast and then we're going to take a break. So the next podcast that I highly recommend that you listen to for any business is called Secrets of the Most Productive People by The Fast Company. So the Secrets of the Most Productive People do interview style episodes with two women, one who's a New Zealander and so Kate Davis and Asana, and they do a lot of great work at The Fast Company. Personally, I haven't researched The Fast Company as of yet, but I find it really intriguing. They ask a lot of poignant questions and they ask a lot of interesting questions too. And it's actually quite interesting to listen to them, even when a topic maybe doesn't interest me per se, or it's about specifically how do you manage a team, where, you know, right now I don't have a team just yet. I still listen to it because I find it interesting and engaging to the point where, yeah, I can use this stuff in the future. And then as a business owner, you probably will. And you might not use that information right now, but you'll definitely use it in the future. So Secrets of the Most Productive People, I believe, is a book, or at least it sounds like a book title that I'm thinking of. But all the stuff that they talk about is really witty, really fun, and the quality is top notch. And you can also get a couple of ideas where they actually implement some of the stuff that they actually get into the interview with. They interview someone who is, how to ask and land for a promotion. So someone who is an expert in that field, and then they actually implement that into the workplace. They actually implement that into, how to do that thing. So when I say, say for example, what's the one that I can talk about? Yeah, so work smarter, how to stay productive while working for yourself. Again, so that's not specifically corporate, that is specifically for sole traders and businesses and people who run a small team. And they get, Chris Denson, who is the guest. They come in, they talk about strategies on how to improve it, and then they actually go do it. And then they come back a week later and film. They record the rest of the podcast after they've done the strategies that Chris has recommended. And then from there, they can say, okay, I tried this strategy. It didn't personally work for me, but I can see how it works for others, or it just hasn't worked. I don't see how this works. Done. And it's really nice to see that you have an interview with someone and you take away the strategies from them and they actually implement it in their own business, and you can see what worked for them. Of course, everyone is different. Every business is different, but they can see how it works. And as a consumer, you can listen to it and understand, okay, so we had a strategy about, weekly team meetings. Okay, I'm not entirely sure about that. And then they implement it and then they go, yeah, this was not a good idea. Maybe it's a good idea to have 5-minute power hours at the start of every day, or what have you, what changes. So I highly recommend this podcast. On the list now, we have the Squiz podcast. Now, for any of our Australian listeners, you would be listening to the Squiz as, Squiz is a thing. So squiz is Australian Cockney slang for a look. So, did you squiz that magpie? Magpie is a local bird. Squiz is to look, or to look intently, or to look with interest. And a regular news, I think it's a daily podcast. Yeah. So it's a daily podcast by these two women, two hosts, and they have a great media presence online as well, where they break everything down into digestible, 30 seconds to a minute understanding of the story or what the update is. But also they put it into context when it comes to the two of them discussing after they've read the headlines and a little bit of the biography to describe what's going on. And they explain it to each other to make sure each other makes sense of what's going on. But also in doing so, they make it clear and easy for you as the listener to understand, okay, what's the latest thing? Hold on, what's going on? Making it nice and clear. And they do have a lot of offshoot podcasts as well. So if there's something that you're not fully understanding, like the Hong Kong stuff that's going on with Hong Kong, I didn't quite understand what was going on until I listened to their deep dive podcast on another podcast that they have. I think it's called Squiz In Depth or Squiz something like that, where they went into a lot more depth, and now I kind of understand what's going on. I think it's a little bit strange why it doesn't just kind of let them deal, because it's not like you had control of them originally. But no, politics is politics. I'm not in control. It doesn't fully affect me, but I learned a lot about it. So the Squiz is a daily podcast. It's set for mainly Australians because it's aimed at Australian audience, but I'm sure all the information would be applicable to anyone overseas listening to us now. So I highly recommend that daily podcast to listen to. The next podcast is a generalized business podcast about working and careers. So this one is by Amantha Imber. Okay. All right, let's go back. I'm so tired, but we can do this. So the next podcast that we listen to is called How I Work by Amantha Iber. And this podcast does a couple of different things a bit differently. It does an interview with a specific person or a specific CEO, someone of either importance of their company or in a leadership position, and they learn and get a lot of details from them. So those are like 5 minutes long. But what Amantha does that's really interesting is she does these my favorite tip or really shortened version. So these episodes ends up being like 5 minutes long, where she takes the one thing that she got from that interview that she did so many weeks ago. And like she gets that little snippet, that 10-second, 20-second snippet from that interview, and then talks more about it and gives it a little bit more context. And for you as a listener who maybe didn't get a chance to listen to that full interview, or maybe a lot like me, I listened to that full interview and then she pulls out this specific tip and I'm like, oh, I didn't think about it that way, and I didn't really... Wow. And that's something that we're going to be implementing into our own podcast. It's just a little bit further down the line. Probably 2020 is when we're going to be implementing it. But I highly recommend listening to this podcast regularly because it's just so interesting and just makes your brain tick about, oh, I listened to that podcast. Oh, I didn't get that from it. And then she provides that different view of focus that really intrigues me and really interests me of how she manages to pull that type of information out of those interviews. And I feel a lot more enriched, and I feel like I'm a lot more informed than I was before I, going out than I was going in. And the last podcast I'm going to recommend to you guys today is one from the iHeartRadio / Stuff You Should Know genre of people. They are a podcast, I don't want to say juggernaut, but they create a lot of podcasts over a period of time. So you'll hear a lot of podcasts that are maybe very popular are run by this group. And this is one by Laura Vanderkam, and it's called Before Breakfast. Now, of course, being in the US, it is set on, I think it's Pacific Standard Time. So their morning is about Australia's evening. But we always, I usually just download it and then listen to it the next day. So when I listen to it in the morning before breakfast, I can listen to it. And their episodes are about 5 minutes long maximum. And they discuss different aspects involving your career, involving your business, involving different things that you can learn about that are easy to consume in about 5 minutes or less. Sometimes I don't always agree with some of the strategies, ideas, or goals that she has, but that doesn't automatically mean that you should not listen to what she has to say. And all of the stuff that she talks about are good things to implement into your life, or good things to know about when the time comes when you actually want to use it for yourself. Like, so, commit random acts of networking. I haven't listened to that specific one today, but when it comes to actually networking with other people on a regular basis, which is something we're going to be discussing in a future live stream, where all the stuff that she gives are 5 minute chunks that's really easily accessible and really easy to understand as someone on the run, or someone who just really needs to get the information inside their head and use it and actually put it into action. And she also has a fairly soothing voice as well, which is really nice to listen to. So that's our list for today's video or podcast if you're listening to it. You can listen to the Do Video podcast on your podcast catcher of choice, and we'll also be leaving up this live stream on the YouTube channel. So what we want to do now is, all I want to ask from you guys is, since you can see it on screen, is that I would love you guys to review our podcast on Apple Podcasts. So you can do this by logging in to the Apple Podcast product, which is now, because iTunes is dead, is a separate product called Apple Podcasts. So you would log into that using your Apple account, and if you don't, it's pretty easy to create one, and then giving us a 5-star rating. I usually probably definitely should put that into our regular, outros and intros when it comes to the Do Video podcast. And it's not that we're lazy that we haven't created it. It's just I'm still figuring out what I want to say and how I want to say it, because usually when it gets to that so like the first 30 seconds and the last 30 seconds of a podcast, people have a tendency of skipping because it's just the same intro and outro saying, hey, review us, rate us, join our crew, join our emailing list, blah, 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 blah. And I don't really want to do that every single time. I just want to be genuine and make sure I get the information to you guys. But also I want to make sure that it's nice and clear. So if you want to know how you can help us, say, for example, like reviewing the Do Video podcast, or hopefully you listen to a couple of our episodes, then review it. I want to make it so that it's genuine and it makes sense. But I'll probably implement that in the new year, that we have a new bumper. So bumper is a technical term, so that bumps at the start and bumps at the end of a podcast episode. So it's nice and clear for you guys about, hey, this is what you're listening to. We discuss everything to do with video, blah, 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 what have you. And it gives people an idea of, okay, this is what I'm into, and then they listen to the podcast, and then once they've gotten to the end, they have an idea of, okay, how can you support us? Well, you can join our Patreon or join our group or what have you. And say, for example, for us, we have a video conference crew on Facebook where you meet a whole bunch of other business owners and people who are starting their video journey, and you can learn a lot from them. And of course, I'm there as well. This is my group. And then also, like you said, review the podcast, give us 5 stars, or subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Do Video, or subscribe to our YouTube channel, Video Confidence Coach. So I'm going to leave you guys because I am so tired. And we're going to finish up. And make sure you check out, the Video Confidence Coach playlist on Spotify if you do have Spotify, and you can check out and jam out to the tunes before you start doing your podcast or before you start filming. So we'll leave you guys to it. I'm going to finish the stream and I'm going to go mwah.